Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot. We charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
On the morning of their journey to the Court of Nightmares, Feyre and Cassian venture alone to the prison with the hope that the bone carver has the answers to their most pressing questions. When the carver outlines the requirements of his assistance, Feyre and Cassian return to Valaris empty-handed. A visit to her sisters has Feyre insistent that both they and Lucian move immediately to the townhouse from the House of Wind.
The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author. This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of the book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning. Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, death, and depression, will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk, a podcast where we deep dive into the writing of your favorite novels.
This season, we're exploring Sarah J. Maas's most ambitious novel in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. This is Jac.
And I'm Amy. This week, we're discussing chapters 22 through 24 in A Court of Wings and Ruin. This week, we ask ourselves, what are the consequences of choices made in this section?
Themes we see in this section include bad judgment and mates.
We enter chapter 22 the morning after Feyre's nightmare. In case you've forgotten, this was the nightmare where Feyre was back under the mountain. Nesta was tortured like Claire Better, Elaine was on a spit, and Rhys was being led to the bedroom by Amarantha. This bitch will not die.
No. But when I was reading the nightmare scene, I kept asking myself, why now? Why is Feyre having this kind of dream now? Because it comes out of nowhere. It features Amarantha, which is so 2 books ago. Why isn't she worried about the King of Hybern? That's the more immediate threat. The randomness of the dream and the content of it shows where Feyre is at mentally. So again, why now? Well, Feyre might be back home at the Night Court, but it's clear she's feeling a bit out of her element. Being a high lady first, friend second, is hard. I'm sure. I can't relate. I'm not a high lady, but it seems pretty difficult. Learning how to fly is hard, and Feyre's realizing that she hurts people with her actions, and again, it's pretty hard. Of course Feyre would have this dream now. She's feeling really vulnerable. Now for my second question. Why Amarantha and not Hybern? Well, I think it's because with Hybern, they all failed. It wasn't just Feyre. The whole inner circle failed there. None of them anticipated what was going to happen and the levels of fuckery that went down. Feyre's time with Amarantha, on the other hand, that was when Feyre herself was at her weakest, which is why she's dreaming of Amarantha. Once Feyre wakes up and is dressed, Rhys asks her if she wants to talk about it, and, quote, "My Illyrian leathers groaned as I turned toward him." Even her clothing, the Illyrian leathers that are supposed to be representative of strength, are groaning when faced with her own vulnerability.
What we see here is a really, really beautiful callback to Mist and Fury. Rhysand asks if Feyre wants to talk about her nightmare, with him or with anyone else. Though Feyre initially resists, she eventually opens up. Quote, "The savage grip of those terrors lightened, cleared away like dew in the sun. I freed a long breath as if blowing those fears from me, letting my body loosen in its wake."
I internally screamed for joy when I read of Rhys asking Feyre if she wants to talk to anyone else, and that internal scream sounded more like that. But the emotional intimacy king that Rhys is open for Feyre to find comfort and process with anyone, aka a therapist, and it's not just him, and I love that about him. I mean, hell, I think he would be okay if she went to Cassian instead of him.
Oh, yeah, or more.
Yeah.
Or, yeah. He just wants her to be okay.
Yeah, and it's just like, it takes a certain kind of confidence and humility.
Yeah. This is so unlike at the start of Mist and Fury, when both Feyre and Tamlin would wake from nightmares of Under the Mountain and would pretend to not notice and never talk about it. What a difference speaking her fears aloud is for Feyre. Imagine the difference it could have made for her relationship with Tamlin. This is also different from the time that Feyre woke from a nightmare when she first moved into the townhouse in Mist and Fury, as well as the one time Feyre woke Rhys from his nightmare. This is grounding us as readers in Feyre and Rhys's relationship. They are healthy in a way we haven't been able to enjoy for a long time, and I'm here for it. But also, did you notice that sun reference again? Sun and mates go hand in hand.
That should have been the theme, sun, for this episode.
It's true.
We're going to get into it.
I have to gripe about a moment that happens as Cassian and Feyre ascend to the prison's entrance. Feyre asks Cassian who Cassian put into the prison. Cassian tells Feyre that that's, quote, best left for another time. Yet immediately after this, Cassian asks Feyre, quote, "You really think unleashing the Carver will do the trick against Hybern?"
What the fuck?
I'm sorry. Why say this? It doesn't seem like something you want overheard by prisoners who might be trying to get out of the prison. And then, on top of that, Cassian continues to not answer Feyre's question. It just all feels very absurd to me.
Isn't it the whole thing that, like, they can sell information?
Yeah.
So, like, why aren't they selling that information to Hybern? Like,
Right.
Oh, by the way, they want the Carver out.
Exactly. It just doesn't make sense.
Yes, and Feyre and Cassian talk about their, quote, friend who would know because she got out. Then Feyre thinks, careful. We have to be careful when mentioning Amren's name. Because Feyre doesn't say Amren's name, she says she. As if there's a large list of beings that got out of the prison. How long is that list? Out of curiosity. I'm going to be generous, and let's say even like a handful.
Yeah, a dozen.
A dozen. Which even then we know that's not true, but let's say a dozen. And then they add her gender, saying she got out. So how many female inmates got out? I think that the inmates in this prison can guess who you're talking about, Feyre.
Exactly.
Oh my God. There are two moments when Feyre and Cassian are heading to the prison that stick out to me. First, Feyre asks Cassian what he would do because he's the general. And the second is when Cassian challenges Feyre on how they would keep the Carver contained. And Feyre thinks, quote, which I'd have to figure out as well, I suppose. These are moments for Feyre when it's dawning on her that she has to actually work. And I don't mean that in a Feyre's lazy kind of way. I think it's just more of a like, oh my God, this is hard. This is bigger than I'm expecting. And it's not that she doesn't want to work, but she wasn't prepared for the kind of work that she would need to do as High Lady and how she has to change the way that she thinks. She has to change everything about herself.
I like this point because Feyre's so used to operating one step at a time and not always thinking through. Mm-hmm. We saw, it looked a little bit different in the Spring Court where she would anticipate reactions. Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing with the Carver is she's making a decision. We're going to get the Carver to ally with us. And then,
there's consequences?
Or there's a lot of things I have to make happen to be able to actually do it. It's not as simple as she's used to.
Yeah, it's like, here's a good idea. Oh, no, I have to make the idea happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's not an obvious 1, 2, 3 step. It's got branch off steps and
layers and
interdependencies.
Yeah,
She would not be good at project management, let me just say.
No, I thought you were about to say she wouldn't be good at podcasting. I'm like, you're right. It's hard. We're like high ladies here, just trying to project manage.
At one point, Feyre asks how the Carver wound up in the prison, and Cassian replies, quote, I don't know. No one does. Normally I would put this in the breadcrumbs, But since we learned pretty quickly the bone carver chose to hide in the prison, it felt better to mention it here. I love this clue because it makes the bone carver mysterious without revealing what he is. Self-preserving. When Feyre and Cassian enter the prison, the first thing that greets them is death. The air inside the prison felt, quote, like wading through the unstirred air of a tomb, like stealing a breath from the open mouth of a skull. I had to point this out because it's beautiful and such good writing. Instantly, we feel how Feyre feels, like we're surrounded by skeletons and death. It's morbid and terrifying, and I love it.
I love that line so freaking much. I highlighted it, underlined it. It's one of my favorite lines that she's written.
Yeah, I think so too, because even the air feels heavy and oppressive, and it's just, she achieves so much in so little
I mean,
space.
just the term unstirred air. I'm in it. I feel it. It's gross.
Yeah. Reminds me of the catacombs in Paris.
Yeah, it has a smell.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it does.
Cassian and Feyre are holding hands as they go through the prison, and there's something about the both of them and their need to comfort for one another that I just find to be really sweet. I know it's safe to say that Cassian is holding Feyre's hand because he has to keep an eye on her, but he doesn't have to hold her hand the entire time. It's a small moment, but it's something that's small and I appreciate it.
I also noticed this as well, and I wondered to what extent is that a requirement for safety in the prison? Because Rhys did the same thing when they were in the prison. It's sweet.
Yeah, but I always assumed Rhys did it because he wanted to hold her hand.
I did too. But it also, is it Cassian wants to hold her hand or is it a requirement? I don't know.
That would be funny if it was a requirement. Because I'm sure when in Silver Flames, Cassian goes with Nesta, and I don't remember if he holds her hand, but I have no doubt if he had the opportunity.
He did. Yeah.
Maybe that's just like one of the rules. Yeah. To hold hands.
Otherwise, you might get snatched. I don't know.
I want Cassian, Lucian, and Azriel to all go down together and all three hold hands.
Before they reach the Carver's cell, Cassian says to Feyre, quote, "But this is war. We don't have the luxury of good ideas, only picking between the bad ones." I wanted to go back to something we talked about in episode 6 in light of this comment. Something we're seeing more and more of is this idea of the lesser of two evils. We see this when we compare Hybern's attitude towards humans versus Prythian's attitude towards humans and lesser fae. We saw that with Feyre's decisions in the Spring Court. But I have to acknowledge that this book is a lot about choosing between lesser evils with the limited information you have, and how that can royally screw things up sometimes. And I appreciate that, because we often have to deal with that in real life too.
It really is the theme of this book, like picking the lesser of two evils. And we haven't done the analysis yet for the second half of the book, so I'm curious to see if that ends up being a bigger theme at the end of the book. Because right now, there's so much groundwork between that. I mean, that was Feyre's entire time at the Spring Court. That's what's going on now. It might be more of a not subplot, but like, not the obvious theme of the book, but it should be. It's just really good.
To me, it's on equal level with The Monster Within. It just feels less obvious because it's such a natural part of life.
I think The Monster Within is addressed more head on versus The Lesser of Two Evils feels more, you have to look for it. It's there, but I think it's not as obvious as The Monster Within. Like, Feyre has to look at an actual mirror of a monster.
Yeah,
like, it's
true.
very, like, imagery in your face.
Right.
Which is good, not a bad thing. But the picking of the lesser between two evils, that feels a lot more subtle throughout.
Yeah.
But again, we haven't done the analysis for the second half, and there might be a really obvious moment. And I say, hey guys, remember episode 8? Sorry.
Yeah, I just think we're going to continue to see this.
I completely agree.
Feyre and Cassian finally confront the bone carver, and this is the first time since Feyre was mated to Rhys that she's seen the small boy that the carver chooses to show Feyre. And it is this moment that Feyre realizes the bone carver is showing her their son. And boy, did I scream mentally when I made the connection the first time I read the book.
This is a part that Amy didn't tell me, so I'm hearing it for the first time.
Yes.
I'm excited. I have to pay attention because the note after this is Jac reacts and discusses.
Okay. I think we may have spoken about this last season, about a theory one of our listeners, Valerie, had regarding the bone carver and who he shows to each individual. This is a spoiler for Silver Flames, so if you haven't read it, skip ahead a few minutes. Valerie's theory is that the person the bone carver shows you is the person that should or could be the cause of your death Or like in Feyre's case, she could have died during the pregnancy. I'm actually wondering if it's the opposite in this moment. What if this individual is the cause for hope for the person to live instead of face death? For example, Rhys sees Jurian in Mist and Fury. Were it not for Amarantha and Jurian going head-to-head during the war on the day that Rhys had planned to try to kill Amarantha, Rhys would likely have died in the end. Instead, Amarantha got distracted by Jurian, and Rhys was able to be freed.
I mean, and there's a certain supernatural future, I can tell the future element here, and maybe the Bone Carver knew that Jurian would come back and help.
Maybe. True. Same goes for Feyre seeing her son. By seeing Nyx, Feyre has another reason to ensure that both she and Rhys survive this new war with Hybern so that they can live long enough to have him. It's about hope and about giving Feyre reasons to push herself farther than maybe we think possible this moment.
I love that because later on in this episode, I defend the Bone Carver. And I don't think he's all that bad. I think we give him a bad rep.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I do wonder who Cassian sees.
Nesta.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
In my heart, I really do believe it. Just because of how much the Bone Carver says, Nesta. But just how much the Bone Carver just says Nesta all over again. I don't know. I mean, and I love this idea of what's the thing that gives you hope? And to me, that's Nesta.
Yeah.
I just bet it's a sexy, sultry Nesta.
Oh, yeah.
The kind that might be giving him come hither eyes. You know? But he can't, for him, it's almost this will never happen. She'll never love me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, poor Cassian. Oh. Something I noticed in the interactions between the Bone Carver and our heroes is that he does not call either by name, but by title. Feyre is called High Lady and Cursebreaker. Cassian is called Warrior Heart, Lord of Bloodshed, and Prince of Bastards. Is there significance? I don't know. But what I do know is that shortly after calling Cassian Prince of Bastards, the Bone Carver calls Nesta a queen, and that feels intentional to me.
I think it's important, the titles, genuinely. When I think of another character that only refers to Feyre by her titles, it's the Book of Breathings, and for this conversation, we're going to consider the book a character. Maybe I have zero self-preservation skills, but in this fantasy world, I never got the ick from the Bone Carver. I think the Bone Carver is pretty great, and he's been all hype and not much delivery. Part of this is because what he calls everyone, part of my theory as to why he's a good guy. There isn't a bad title that he gives anyone here. Not with the Book of Breathings. The Book of Breathings calls her, I can't remember the name, you do though.
The Book of Breathings calls Feyre Princess of Carrion.
Yeah, that one. I always forget. I want to say Catalan.
Or Carry On.
Carry On, yeah. But, and that's not a great title. But the Bone Carver gives her positive titles. And the Bone Carver isn't calling Cassian killed a bunch of Fey Heart, massacre heart. No, it's Warrior Heart. This scene with the whole Nesta thing, it's creepy, as you could tell by my lovely imitation from earlier. But none of what the Bone Carver says is wrong. In fact, it's more helpful than anything. They gave a lot of information about Nesta and her powers, which Nesta's not sharing with them. Maybe we should give the Bone Carver some more bones. I've always been a fan of the Bone Carver. I would gladly give it all the bones just to hear about my problems and hang out with it. Bone Carver and I are tight. That's all I gotta say.
I feel like you could make the Bone Carver your therapist.
The Bone Carver would resent me so. I have a feeling the Bone Carver and I would be really good friends because it would be creepy and I just would celebrate it. We're yeah, get it.
Yeah, you would.
We'd watch horror movies together.
Yeah. Knowing what we know of Silver Flames, it is not surprising to me that the Bone Carver is aware of Nesta, given what powers she receives from the cauldron. It's lovely foreshadowing on SJM's part of what is to come. It does make me wish Nesta had been able to meet the Carver for some morbid reason.
It makes sense to me, though. I think the Bone Carver would have liked Nesta quite a bit. And I think the Bone Carver would have showed up to her as one of her smutty book characters that she likes to read.
Yeah. There are a lot of breadcrumbs in the Bone Carver story at the start of chapter 23. We'll leave those for the breadcrumbs section. I do just want to point out what Feyre thinks. Quote, I waited and waited and waited, picking apart the story he laid out like crumbs of bread. And that just gave me so much joy. I had to share it.
You and I are highlighting the exact same thing because I also laughed at this. Also, I saw a TikTok of another podcast, and it's a new podcast, and they were doing an episode on ACOTAR, and in the clip they said, SJM leaves these breadcrumbs, and I gasped. I was like, what? Breadcrumbs? As if we invented that term? As if no one has ever used breadcrumbs at all on this planet? And then reading this, I was like, oh yeah, I guess SJM uses it too. Like, I gasped also. I was like, oh my God, does she listen to the podcast in the future somehow?
No, let's forget that Hansel and Gretel exist and leave a trail of breadcrumbs.
It's the same thing with Chef's Kiss.
Oh, God.
Like, whenever I would hear Chef's Kiss on TikTok after the first season came out, I was like, do they follow the podcast? No, they don't. That's a real thing.
That's a thing people use.
Yeah. Like Amy said, there's a lot here that we'll cover in the breadcrumbs, and it's going to be a giant Maasverse spoiler central. But I want to point out a parallel that I'm wondering if it's there or if I'm making it up. This is not spoiler. Don't worry, guys. The Bone Carver, Striga, and Koschei, 3 siblings, 1 set of twins. We only get 2 names. The Archeron sisters, 3 siblings. I'm not saying that they match one another, but I feel like it's just too much of a connection between the sisters and the death gods. And the way the Bone Carver talks about himself, it's like he's not a death god as well. Mm-hmm. Did you notice that? Like, he talks about them being death gods. Yeah. I'm like, but she's your twin. And that's your brother.
Right.
You're a death god too.
Right.
Or at the very least, the Bone Carver's not as strong as his siblings.
Yeah, or it's almost like he relinquishes whatever power he has, except to see death.
The Bone Carver is Rowan.
Oh.
Your mom's dog.
Yeah.
He's like, I relinquish everything. Pet my belly. That's the Bone Carver.
Yeah.
Like, be my friend.
Yeah, pretty much.
So in this hypothetical that I'm presenting here, I feel like Feyre's the Weaver, Nesta's Koschei, Elaine's the Bone Carver. Feyre has the connection to the Weaver because, the whole cottage thing, and it's the Weaver's mirror that Feyre looks into. The Weaver is also the Bone Carver's twin, and we've said that Elaine and Feyre are pretty similar to one another. Nesta is the most death god of the 3, and Koschei makes the deal with Papa Archeron, right? The daddy connection is what works for me there. And Koschei is kind of like the most powerful, sort of the 3, and I feel like Nesta, again, the most death god of them. And Elaine is supposed to be the weakest of the bunch, but she has the gift of vision, just like the Bone Carver seems to have the gift of just knowing things.
Yeah, well, and the gift of, vision of death.
Yeah.
I mean, you've convinced me. I was so glad when you made that comparison because I never thought to.
Between now and this episode coming out, I worry that there'll be someone on TikTok that's like, I have an idea. And it's like, no. I mean, yes, you have an idea and I'm proud of you.
Good for you. But we recorded this in January of 2023.
Yeah. But I'm proud of everyone.
Are we?
Proud of our listeners. That's about it.
Yeah. When the Bone Carver reveals that he chose to be in the prison, Feyre and Cassian realize that they're not going to get anywhere and decide to leave, knowing that they're already late to leave for the hewn city. But then they pause on the threshold. That good old threshold. This is after Feyre has decided she and Cassian have revealed too much information by sharing that they are going to the hewn city. The Carver, deducing their plans to bargain with Keir, drops them a hint about the Ouroboros. So what's the threshold in the scene? The point of no return. Knowledge of the Ouroboros will influence everything Feyre does from now on, what she chooses to pursue instead of the Ouroboros, and when she will ultimately confront it. I think that by mentioning the Ouroboros, the Carver has set in stone Feyre's journey for the rest of Wings and Ruin, and there is no coming back from that.
You and I are just twinsies today because same. We talked about Feyre starting the book being as non-Feyre as possible, and the Ouroboros is the perfect embodiment of what it looks like when Feyre faces her inner demons.
Now, there is a lot of foreshadowing for Silver Flames at the end of this chapter before Rhys shows up to pick up Cassian and Feyre. I just want to point out my favorite bit of dialogue. When Feyre asks if Cassian would be afraid of Nesta if she was death, he responds, quote, I would be more afraid for her to have that power, but not afraid of her. Nothing about Nesta could frighten me.
God.
Ah, my heart.
God. Destroyed. It's destroyed. My heart is destroyed, but in the best way possible. At one point, Cassian tells Feyre that he walked beside death his entire life. And in one of our lies, our listeners pointed out that it means Azriel and Nesta.
Right, because Azriel is the name of the angel of death.
And Nesta
has death
She's
powers.
a death god. Yeah. Basically.
It's amazing.
It's so good.
One humorous moment I would like to point out before we move on to the next chapter. When Cassian tells Rhys that he's not going to like the carver's asking price, Rhys responds that the carver can have the fancy dinner plates. If food is power, certainly dinner plates are a symbol of power in this moment too. Rhys is willing to hand over some power to gain the carver's allegiance. And it cracks me up. SGM may not have intended that meaning, but I'll take it anyway.
It's funny. He's literally serving up power on a silver platter. Power platter.
Power platter. Chef's kiss.
I'll have chef's kiss. I'll have the power platter, please.
Sounds like a meal I might get at Disneyland.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, like the Incredicoaster.
Right.
Like
or somewhere in like Avengers campus.
I'll have the power platter.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we go into chapter 24, listeners, you need to know something. Amy and I normally Amy and I normally go through the entire episode together to compare notes, to make sure that it makes sense and everything. And we do that every single time, except for chapter 24. Well, we did it for a little bit at the beginning.
Yeah, but the majority of chapter 24, which is the second half of this entire episode, we did not prep.
No. The reason why is because there's going to be a lot of Lucian and Azriel and Elaine discussion, and we felt like you guys deserve the natural reactions for that one.
And who knows what that will be.
Yeah. Not that you don't get natural reactions, but you guys know what I mean. Hopefully.
But like our first blush reactions.
We're going to blush.
I mean, we might. I don't know.
Goals. I'm going to do it.
Feyre, Rhys, and Cassian return to the townhouse at the start of chapter 24. Feyre realizes she needs to make a stop at the House of Wind to check on her sisters, particularly Elaine. This is where I really begin to ask myself in earnest, is Feyre a bad sister? I brought this up last week, and I think we're going to continue to see instances throughout Wings and Ruin where this question is relevant. Quote, I should have checked in on Elaine earlier, should have remembered that her would-have-been wedding was in a few days, but I curse myself for forgetting.
Yes, Feyre, you should have remembered.
Yeah. No excuse.
No.
I mean, I have to give it to Feyre. At least she's aware enough to know she is in the wrong here and doesn't make excuses. Is there a lot on Feyre's plate right now? Absolutely. But you cannot deny the possibility that Feyre intentionally was avoiding her sister because it was easier than facing the reality of the situation.
This is definitely the most self-aware Feyre has been at this point. But for me personally, she hasn't had enough on her plate to not think about visiting them. Feyre's been training to fight, learning to fly, and going to the library for research. Out of all of those things, going to the library for research is the most important thing to accomplish, but training can take a back seat to go say hi to your sisters.
Also, training and the library are in the same building as her sisters.
Oh my god. Wait, I don't think the library's in the same...
It's below the House of Wind.
Oh yeah, it is, isn't it? Because that's how Nesta...
Mm-hmm. And the training ring is on the roof. House of Wind.
Is on the roof of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she has to work hard to avoid her sisters.
It's like, it's me being in the other room. I'm so sorry. I can't help you right now. I'm so busy.
As you sit on the couch.
As I sit on the couch, yeah. Or go sleep with like my mate and like go have sex in that. Sorry, I'm busy right now. They could probably hear them. At least Feyre and Rhys had sex away from the House of Wind.
Right. For the first time since her initial lesson with Azriel, Feyre attempts to fly on her own. Like all things SJM does when it comes to learning a new skill, there is a very steady progression we can track from this moment until the Hybern Camp chapters later in the novel. Remember, in chapter 19, during the first lesson, Feyre couldn't even keep her wings off the ground. In chapter 24, she summons them so she can glide into the House of Wind. Unfortunately, though, she falls 20 feet. No one witnesses her, quote, graceless tumble through the air. Feyre acknowledges, quote, both my knees and my pride were significantly bruised.
I don't know what makes Feyre think she can just throw herself into flying. And I'm not sure what your notes are coming up since they're highlighted dark, meaning I can't read them. So, but here are my initial thoughts. We'll see if they match up at all. My initial thoughts here are, what the fuck is wrong with you, Feyre? But then I asked myself, does this behavior line up with her past actions? Is it so hard to believe that she would throw herself into flying? Well, yes, it does actually make sense. Back when she was human and her family was poor, Feyre taught herself how to hunt and how to swim. For swimming, she literally threw herself into the water, and that was the only way for Feyre to survive, to throw herself into things. It's reckless, and there's a bit more lightheartedness to her learning how to fly, but that's because her family's survival isn't dependent on her learning this. Except plot twist, it will be. It ends up being essential for saving Elaine. It's almost like all lessons that Feyre must learn will ultimately help her sisters.
And that's what makes this good writing.
It's what makes it good writing.
It all ties in somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I thought a lot about Feyre's journey with flying because to me, it parallels her experience with free falling in Mist and Fury. So as I think about Feyre's attempts to fly and the process by which she learns, I think it's vital to Feyre's journey this season, A, because it reminds her that her shit stinks too.
Yeah.
AKA, it humbles Feyre and reminds her that despite all her fancy powers, she's not perfect. My second thought is that I want to suggest that Feyre's attempts to fly reflect her journey as High Lady. She's able to don the mask just like she's able to summon the wings. However, her attempts to be High Lady are going just about as well as her attempts to fly.
I love that.
She stumbles a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got, in theory, the mechanics to do it, but she's not able to execute.
I think that makes a lot of sense, especially since Feyre, in her training with flying, is coming from it as a late bloomer, right? From as an outsider perspective, the same way that Azriel did. And with her being High Lady, she's coming from it as a former human.
Right, exactly.
So I like that.
Thanks.
Feyre finds her sisters in the House of Wind's library, and she's coming in hot. She is ready to pick a fight with Nesta, and I'm going to say that Feyre picks a fight with Nesta for many reasons, but for this time, maybe there's an element of anger at herself, because right now, Nesta has been the better sister to Elaine. She has kept an eye on her. Quote, Nesta arched an elegant eyebrow. Where's your menagerie of friends? I leveled a steely look back at her. Those friends have offered you shelter and comfort. Side note, only Reese did, not the others. All right, back to the quote. Are you ready for tonight? Yes. Nesta merely resumed reading the book in her lap. Pure dismissal. I let out a little snort that I knew would make her see red and strode for Elaine. This is such a toxic sister combo, the two of them. But Feyre is ready to go in there and fight, and of course Nesta is defensive.
I want to go back to something you said that I think also influences this scene.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that Feyre is angry at herself, and she's approaching Nesta with that anger. I agree. I also think that anger is also fueled by the fact that she just fucked up flying.
Oh, yeah.
And her pride is bruised. So what is she going to go do? She's going to throw her weight around with her sisters.
Yeah.
And I understand that on such a deep level of taking out your anger on your siblings, even though they have nothing to do with it. And that's how I see all of Feyre's interactions with her sisters in this book.
Yeah.
Is she's angry about something else in her life. So what's she going to do? She's going to take it out on her sisters.
It makes total sense. But of course, it's not even sisters.
It's Nesta.
Nesta.
Yeah.
Because she's a punching bag to Feyre.
Yep.
She's coming in, walking, be like, hey, fuckers.
Kind of.
You, let's go. Of course, Nesta's done with her shit.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine every time Feyre couldn't come home with food, she and Nesta probably got in fights.
Oh, yeah. And every time she did come home with food,
they got in fights.
Yeah, because it's like she doesn't come home with food, they're all hungry. She does come home with food, you didn't do anything to help.
Right, exactly. We spent a little bit of time last season comparing Elaine to Feyre. I'm going to continue to do so. So let's start off by examining what Elaine is wearing. A pale pink gown. Did you know that's the same color of the dress Feyre wore at the start of Mist and Fury? Go back to chapter 2 of that book and you will see it.
Yeah, you did. Because I went back and looked. And you're right. Not that I was questioning you.
But I just love that I remembered it as I read it.
I love it too.
Like Feyre at the start of Mist and Fury, Elaine continues to be despondent and has difficulty adjusting to her new Fey life. And that connection is not made just by their actions, but also by the dress that they both wear or wore. Feyre observes, quote, "Even wasted away by grief and despair, Elaine's beauty was remarkable. Hers was a face that could bring kings to their knees. And yet there was no joy in it, no light, no life." Again, just like Feyre from Mist and Fury.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've all read the book already, we know that Elaine is a seer, and this is when we get our first glimpses of breadcrumbs of her abilities. Quote, "I can hear your heartbeat. If I listen carefully, I can hear her heartbeat too." Just like the Firebird reference that Elaine makes in this section, this reference isn't to Nesta, but to Vasa. Instead of addressing Elaine's odd comments head-on, though, and instead of digging deeper, Feyre avoids it all by suggesting, quote, "I'd like you to come tend my garden at the townhouse if you're willing." Feyre is being very, very Tamlin right now. Granted, Elaine likes gardening. However, there's a parallel in my mind between Tamlin and Ianthe expecting Feyre to plan and host parties, and Feyre asking Elaine to garden instead of really getting at what is going on in Elaine's head.
But it's the exact same thing as Feyre liking to paint and Tamlin shoving the paint in her. I mean, he didn't shove it, but, like giving it to her as a present. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Like, don't you like this?
You should do this more often.
Oh, is this going to help your trauma?
Yeah, exactly. It's the exact same thing.
Yep.
Ironically, when Feyre and Nesta go hide in the library stacks, Nesta asks whether Elaine has powers, and Feyre responds, quote, "I don't think so, unless this is the first sign of something manifesting." It is, Feyre.
It is. I want to spend a little time on what Elaine is saying, because in order to understand this scene, it's important to understand what's happening. So I think it's fair to say that what Elaine is saying has a double meaning. What she says is not what we should interpret at face value. This line in particular, quote, "Will I hear the earthworms writhing throughout the soil, or the stretching of roots? Will the bird of fire come to sit in the trees and watch me?" Elaine's not saying that she can hear them. She's asking if she will. I personally feel like she's asking about death and if she can hear/see death.
I love it.
Yeah. Because earthworms.
Yeah.
Dead things.
Right? And the stretching of roots, it implies her being underground.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, and then we have that famous line later where Cassian's like, "It's going to take a lot more to kill me." And she's like, "No, it's not."
Mm-hmm.
Bitch line.
It is a bitch line.
It's like,
I love it. Vicious.
I know. What if, does everyone know she's a seer at that point? I can't remember. If I was Elaine, I would say shit like that all the time.
Just to fuck with
freak
people.
Yeah, just to freak them out.
It's awful. Hidden away in the stacks, Feyre and Nesta share a moment of calm. I think this is because Feyre recognized in Nesta something that Feyre has felt a lot this series, and that is guilt. But this is disrupted by Feyre's bumbling need to confront her sister about not training with Cassian. I want to talk about the breadcrumbs here because it's so well done. Feyre says to Nesta, quote, "You said you wanted our enemies dead. Why not kill them yourself?" Nesta inspected her nails. Why bother when someone else can do it for me? I want to focus on the fact that Nesta inspected her nails. What other time has Nesta done that? Only one comes to mind for me, and that's at the start of Thorns and Roses when Feyre asks her sister to chop wood. Although Nesta refused at the time, she ultimately did chop the wood.
Yeah.
And so there's a subtle foreshadowing here with this act. Though Nesta says someone else can kill the King of Hybern for her, she will ultimately do it herself. Chef's kiss.
Wow, Amy, good job.
I obviously was feeling myself this when I was making these notes.
That's amazing. Yeah, you were. That is such a good point. I love that.
Thanks.
I also think it's a dumb thing for Feyre to have said, though, to Nesta. Why don't you, the most untrained person with the shortest amount of time to train, kill one of the most powerful Fae there is?
No, it's definitely dumb, but this is the second time SJM has gotten someone to suggest that Nesta should kill the King of Hybern. So it's obviously intentional, but Feyre's being stupid.
It's 100% intentional. It's great writing from SJM. Feyre's the dumb one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before Lucian comes in, I want to point out that this is the first day Elaine gets out of bed on her own and heads to the library. almost as if she knew Feyre would be there and would hold Nesta back, almost as if she could tell that this needed to play out and Lucien would be there.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, thank you.
That being said, Lucien then bustles in and intrudes on Elaine's vigil at the library window. And what does Feyre do? Invade his mind. Morals be damned.
Yep. What I love about when Feyre invades it, though, is a third-person perspective when being in Lucien's mind. It's Feyre still holding on to herself and knowing she's in another mind. But I think it's also Feyre wanting to distance herself from what is going on in Lucien's mind. That she doesn't want to feel or understand him too much because then she might feel for him.
That's a great point because it always bothered me that it was in third person.
Yeah.
But I like this point that it creates distance between Feyre and Lucien because Feyre is not ready to feel empathy for Lucien.
Nope, not at all.
There are a few things I want to point out that we learned through this blip in the narrative. Let me try to organize them in some logical fashion. The first is Elaine as Feyre. There are a handful of similarities between Elaine in this scene and Feyre of Mist and Fury. We're reminded of Elaine's fasting and what it's doing to her body, just as Feyre once starved herself. Lucien also describes Elaine's eyes as, quote, the brown of a fawn's coat. Fawn is equivalent to doe, which is equivalent to Feyre of Thorns and Roses.
Mm-hmm.
Totally intentional.
100%. Let's also not forget that Elaine is missing her wedding and is instead spending that day with her mate, just like Feyre did with Rhys.
Good point.
They also both have that second love rule that SJM loves to do, where the first guy is the wrong guy, and the second one is the love match.
Yep, you're right.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
At the end of the scene, Lucien begs Feyre to, quote, take Elaine to the sea, take her to some garden, but get her out of this house for an hour or two. This is just like Feyre at the start of Mist and Fury when she had to beg Lucien to convince Tamlin of the same thing.
Yep. I think it's also meant to show just how much Lucien is not like Tamlin. Tamlin locked up Feyre. He didn't want her out of his sight. Here, Lucien is encouraging Elain to leave because he has her best interest at heart.
Good point.
I love both of these because it's like you're reading yours. I'm like, oh, good point, Amy. And you're reading mine. Oh, good point. Basically, this is what our prep session sounds like.
Oh, good point.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
So the next theme of things I get from this point of view is the Night Court suits Lucien.
Yep.
There are a few moments where we see Lucien is suited to life at the Night Court. Maybe this should come as no surprise since he's adaptable and has been a transplant before. Lucien thinks, quote, Rhysand was many things, but he certainly had good taste. This entire place had been decorated with thought and elegance with a penchant for comfort over stuffiness. He didn't want to admit that he liked it, didn't want to admit that he found the city beautiful, that the circle of people who now claimed to be Feyre's new family, it was what, long ago, he'd once thought life at Tamlin's court would be. And all Lucien wants is a family, and it hurts.
Oh my God, that really hurts. It hurts. And to me, this is a big moment of Lucien and Feyre being similar because wait for this. This is a moment of Lucien and Rhys also being similar. Just like how Rhys was trapped under Amarantha for 50 years, Lucien was trapped by Tamlin and the abusive friendship dynamic. Lucien is Rhys, Feyre is Elain.
Yes, I see it.
Yeah.
I see it. Which is a nice segue into the other theme of this perspective, mates. There are a lot of male mating urges in this section from Lucien's point of view. I honestly admire his ability to hold back.
Yep.
I will note that Lucien does try to use the tea and biscuits as a way to coax Elain into talking. It's a very food as power moment. I appreciate, however, that he doesn't force the tea or biscuits on Elain. In a way, the tea and biscuits are almost like the mating ceremony, and to consent would be to accept the mating bond, which Elain does not.
Good point.
Thanks. You also can't deny the fact that Lucien thinks the very same thing Feyre thought of Rhys. Quote, she was the most beautiful female he'd ever seen. That, at least, should be enough proof that the mating bond is real and that it's not between Elain and Tamlin. It's Lucien and Elain's mating bond is 100% authentic.
It cracks me up how many people on TikTok are really convinced that Lucien and Tamlin just be...
Yeah. Elain and Tamlin?
Yes, thank you. That Lucien and Tamlin. It is Elain and Tamlin because, like, the biggest thing is Feyre thinks that Elain would do well in the Spring Court. Lucien or Tamlin reaches out. Like, I get what they're saying, but with stuff like this,
yeah, there's so many parallels.
Yeah, SJM's not letting much room here. Lucien is her genuine mate.
Right.
When Lucien walks in, it's sunlight on gold that catches his eye because Elain is sitting in the sun waiting for Lucien. I'm using your sunlight theory here, Amy. Also, as Taylor Swift says, quote, I once believed love would be black and white, but it's golden. She also says, did the twin flames paint you blue? And losing him was blue like I ever known. What else is blue? Azrael siphons. Taylor knows. Hashtag Taylor knows.
No, I can't deny that there's so much sun reference between Lucien and Elain.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yep.
It's there. But continue.
But in all seriousness, I think it's fair to associate darkness and shadows and blue with Daddy Azzy. And what we're getting here is gold, like Lucien's colors from the Autumn Court and his father's Day Court.
We're not done with Lucien's perspective.
No, we're still going.
The next theme is cautionary tale. And this is something that came to me as I was rereading this book. The thought was that, especially as I read from Lucien's point of view, what might have happened to Feyre and Rhysand if Feyre found out too quickly that they were mates? Are Lucien and Elain the cautionary tale of what could have been?
Amy, good point.
Thank you.
That's what I have to say to you. I love this because even though, spoiler warning of Silver Flames, ready, okay, thank you, we're back. Even though Nesta and Cassian are mates, they won't admit it to each other until the very end. Nesta wasn't ready to admit Cassian was her mate so early on. And if we're being real, Nesta knew. Maybe from when she was even human, potentially. I think Nesta knew. Fun, sad fact for everyone. Nesta and Cassian never tell each other that they love each other in Silver Flames. Neither one say I love you at all.
But I think it's implied.
Oh, yeah, it's implied. But it's just a sad moment. When I first told you that.
Yeah, it hurt my heart.
I saw your world shatter there.
It did, because I love them so much. And I want them to be happy together. And the fact that they still hadn't said I love you to each other.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's because Nesta isn't ready to say those words.
It's almost like she's so private that even we don't get to see that.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so our last theme for Lucian's point of view is Elaine's true self. Let's talk about the last bit of conversation Feyre overhears before she leaves Lucian's mind.
When Lucian sits down with Elaine, the first thing she asks is, "Who are you?" Again, everything here has a double meaning, so I think it's more of Elaine asking Lucian, "Who are you? What's this connection that I feel?" I think she can sense Lucian is her mate and isn't sure if she likes that feeling. Later on, Lucian does the whole tugging of the bond, and she's like, "What is that? What am I feeling?" Elaine resents Lucian because when she's having their first real conversation, or at least face-to-face with him, she's supposed to be getting married. This is the worst time to meet him because it's going to leave a bad taste and a bad association.
Absolutely.
Now, let me take you on a journey. One thing that SJM loves to talk about is choice. We hear Feyre mention it all the time, that it's all about her choice, which is why some readers love the idea of Elaine not choosing Lucian, but rather choosing Azriel. Now, let's flip this a little bit. Feyre and Nesta were thrusted upon their mates, and what I mean by that is forced proximity. They were going to fall in love inevitably, right? Like, they were spending time with their mate. Of course they're going to fall in love. Lucian helps Elaine and starts the discussion of choice by removing himself. He isn't going to force himself on Elaine, so he goes off to search for Vassa. I think it's fair to say, Amy, that I know you're going to eventually make a point, probably because you keep hinting at it, that Azriel and Elaine are potential there. But I think it's fair to say that Elaine and Lucian could be OTP, and she will choose Lucian, and that's what will make her story different. I will even go as far to say that she will have to woo him.
Interesting.
Elaine will get to choose who she ends up with, and that's why SJM removes Lucian from her story, because she's now given Elaine the opportunity to go and choose him.
I like that. I honestly don't know who Elaine will choose.
Yeah.
I think it's obvious by what SJM is writing that Elaine and Lucian are mates.
Yep.
And that if Elaine chooses him, it will work, right? Mm-hmm. But Elaine's not at a place in this moment to make that choice. But I like what you're saying is that at the end of the day, she could be the one to choose to be like, no, I do want to be with my mate, and I have to make it happen. Whereas, as you said, Feyre and Nesta just fall into circumstances that force them to be around their mates.
Yeah, I don't see a world where SJM doesn't have mates end up together and choose other people. Especially if Rhys makes it very clear there will always be a part that will long for the other, which means it's not a complete happy ending, right? Like...
And SJM believes in happy endings.
As do I. Not in my personal writing, so don't get excited, guys. But as do I. And I respect that. I respect where it's like, we're going to get a happy ending.
Time will tell.
Yeah. I mean, I think Elaine and Lucian will end up together because I just feel like there's too much that she's hinting at them. But, you know, that woman loves to hurt us.
She does like to hurt us constantly. So just as a reminder, we're still talking about Elaine's true self. During her conversation with Lucian, Elaine asks, "I can hear your heart beating through the stone. Can you hear mine?" When Lucian says no, Elaine reacts by, quote, "Her too thin shoulders seem to curve inward. No one ever does. No one ever looked. Not really." A bramble of words. Her voice strained to a whisper. "He did. He saw me. He will not now." Let's break this down. Elaine can hear the heart of her mate. She could hear Feyre's heart and Vassa's heart too. This is telling me Elaine is in tune with others in a way no one else is attuned.
My one note to this, though, is that Lucian's heart is beating through stone. What does this remind me of? Tamlin's heart, when it was made of Amarantha's curse. When Elaine asks if he can hear her heart too, and she's sad, I think it's because her heart is also a metaphorical stone here too. I'm not saying Lucian is in literal stone, like Tamlin's, but I think his heart is hurting after years of being abused and unseen, being buried, much like Elaine's heart now, because no one can see her really.
Fair. To kind of add to your point, Elaine's disappointment when not even Lucien can hear her heart and Elaine's accompanying words paint a clear picture that Elaine is used to being overlooked, kind of like Lucien. Even her sister and her father did not see Elaine or look at her the way she felt she needed to be looked at. And it's only Grayson who's been able to do that. If I said it once, I'll say it again. There is depth to Elaine that we don't know about, that we haven't seen yet. And hot damn, I can't wait for her book. But let's not forget that despite her beauty, Elaine doesn't feel seen. Scratch that. Because of her beauty, Elaine does not feel seen.
Whoa. That's good.
I really do think that her beauty has hindered, and this is why everyone's like, she's an airhead, she has no depth. Because all they see is, oh, she's beautiful.
She's so pretty.
Everyone thinks she's beautiful.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing that, like, she doesn't want to be seen for her beauty.
That's a really good point. Nice job.
Thanks.
No wonder Elaine develops a crush on Daddy Azzy beyond the obvious reasons of him just being like tall, dark, and handsome. But he's the first one to realize that she's a seer. He's the first one to see her. Laugh at it, Amy.
No, it's great. I'm just admiring it. Sorry.
See, she's a seer, so he's gonna see her. Ha 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 ha. I love making dad jokes and hurting Amy's feelings with them. But does Azriel actually see her, or is he male gazing her? I have no answer to that because we don't have much from his point of view.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be hard to tell.
Yeah.
So now we're finally out of Lucien's point of view, and the scene ends with Feyre demanding that Nesta, Elaine, and Lucien all move into the townhouse. I want to discuss this, because what is it that got Feyre to this point? When we think back to how the townhouse is Feyre's sanctuary and how she might not want to share it with Lucien and her sisters, what is it that changes her mind?
I think it's Feyre's pride that does it. We know Feyre has some major pride, and it's her own feelings that are on full display here. She's been a horrible sister, a horrible friend to Lucien, and it's never been more obvious than it is right now. Also, real fast, Nesta somehow figures out that Feyre was in Lucien's mind, and she's horrified. She asks Feyre if Feyre has ever gone into her mind, and she says no. No wonder Nesta doesn't trust Feyre. That would have been a huge betrayal.
Right, and there's no way for Nesta to know if Feyre ever went into her mind.
Right?
And she has to take Feyre's word for it.
Yeah. I wouldn't trust her.
No, I don't blame her.
Yeah.
On the way back to the townhouse, Feyre attempts to fly again despite her earlier fall. She soars for a minute before, quote, the fall became unbearably deadly. I'm going to argue that maybe Feyre soars for a little bit because her decision to move her sisters and Lucien to the townhouse was a good call. However, overall, Feyre continues to struggle with her high lady responsibilities when it comes to making sound decisions. And as a result, we see her fall. And to your point, she made this decision out of pride, not because it was the right choice. I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
Also, I want to point out that Feyre winnows to the townhouse and straightens vases and figurines while she waits. My note says, Feyre is like my cat when she stumbles and cleans herself immediately to play off her clumsiness. Which is so true.
That's funny. Feyre says, quote, I soared for a minute, savoring the cleansing scream of the wind. Savoring the cleansing scream of the wind. Feyre needs to be cleansed of her own sins that she did at the House of Wind, aka abandoning her sisters.
And invading Lucien's mind.
But it's also aggressive because it's screaming wind. It doesn't feel cleansing. Not like when you get into a bath in those bathing scenes that we've discussed. I think that this shows that Feyre is still not cleansed of her sins.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
We have our first Azriel and Elaine moment. And let me tell you why my heart yearns for them.
Okay.
Ignoring the fact that Azriel carries Elaine in what I presume to be a princess or bridal style into the townhouse.
Through the threshold. I'll give you credit.
Across the threshold.
I'll give you credit for that one.
It's a big thing.
Yep.
He's also gentle with her. Feyre observes that Elaine was a golden brown mass in his arms, her golden brown hair snagging in some of the black scales across his chest and shoulders.
Now I'm going to point out that Elaine has golden brown hairs that snag on Azriel's black scaled armors. This is showing that they don't blend. The gold and black, but also the fact that her hair snags on his armor. It's a metaphor here. She catches his attention. She's in his arms, but her hair is getting caught up in his armor. So it's like a pain for her. I mean, it's painful getting your hair caught. And her hair is being literally ripped out.
Okay.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to keep going. A page later, when Azriel offers to show Elaine the garden and she agrees, she looks at Azriel's arm and says, beautiful. What does she see? Maybe instead of his scarred hands, perhaps his heart.
It's a good question. I think about it every time. Why did I sing that?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, guys. We're told Elaine was looking at either his scarred hands or the blue siphons. His past or his power is beautiful. And I still don't know which one it was. I kind of don't want to know because I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
The way that it's described.
Yeah, I like the ambiguity of it. More importantly, though, after this comment from Elaine, quote, color bloomed on Azriel's golden brown cheeks.
Oh, I didn't catch the golden brown cheeks.
But he inclined his head in thanks and led my sister toward the back doors into the garden, sunlight bathing them. Sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
The sun is present.
Uh-huh.
Golden brown cheeks.
Yep.
Golden brown like her hair.
I'm not going to deny you, Amy. That was a good note.
Thank you.
I did not catch the golden brown cheeks, though. I do love the idea of him blushing. Like, don't get me wrong.
It's adorable.
Like, this scene.
Adorable.
Butterflies. I love it. But I will point out that Feyre is the one observing this, and she describes this as sunlight bathing them. Two things. One, sunlight is bathing them, not blessing them. Bathing is a cleansing action, purification. Elaine needs to be bathed of her trauma, and Azriel needs to be bathed of every dirty thing SJ won't share with us. Spoiler for the secret chapter in Silver Flames. We know eventually that Azriel doesn't feel worthy of touching Elaine, that he views his scarred hands, both literal and metaphorically, of how many people he killed as not being worthy of her. So if Elaine is gold and sunny and all that is good, and she just complimented those very hands, she is the one to be literally bathing him, cleansing him, forgiving him of his sins.
Mm-hmm.
Second, we find out within pages that Feyre wants them together, and this sets the scene up to make it look like a couple walking out together, especially after what she did with Lucien. But yeah, I noticed it. I saw it, but like it was the term bathing them.
Yeah, no, I do think that's a really good point. In what way is this a moment where the fresh start for both of them begins?
Yeah.
Even if they don't end up together, are they both able to heal because of their interactions together?
Yeah.
And move separate ways? I don't know.
I want a sex scene between them.
Oh, I do too. Even if they don't end up together.
I don't really want them to end up together just because of like, he has too many issues.
He has many issues that need to get sorted out. I love the opposites attract, moody boy, sunshine girl. I love those things.
I get it. I don't think she's a sunshine girl.
I don't think she is either.
And I think that's what's going to make it so not them together.
But at this moment, it feels tropey.
She's literally, it feels very tropey. We're tropey-wise, remember? Like, we love a good trope. But I think this is the moment Azriel kind of starts getting a little like, me?
Yeah.
You like me? Because one, she sees his scars. It's beautiful. Two, he gets to be healed a little bit by this.
Yeah.
And he gets to help her, save her. And think about every single time that Moore pushes him away.
Right.
He doesn't get to save anyone. And he doesn't get to save her.
Yeah. And I think for that reason, Elaine and Azriel being significant to one another is meaningful because they can help each other heal from their lost loves, right? Azriel is never going to be with Moore. And he was never going to move on himself. And Elaine is going to be that vehicle for him.
Yeah.
And I could see her interactions with Azriel being the vehicle that moves Elaine past Grayson and towards Lucien.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. I think Elaine will use Azriel.
Yeah, I think they'll use each other. Not on purpose.
Yeah.
But we don't ever... Well, that's not true. Most people don't intentionally use people. But it turns out that sometimes the people in your life are the vehicles for you to make the biggest changes you need.
Exactly. And it's going to be that way with them. I really do believe that. And again, I don't have enough proof to make me think that, spoiler for Silver Flames. Okay, thank you. I don't have enough proof to know that Azriel and Gwen are OTP.
Right.
I don't have anything there to make it beyond than, like, we just love putting women against each other. And there's, like, a slight crush going on. But Azriel also needs to not like anyone for a while.
Azriel needs therapy.
Yeah.
Love me some Daddy Azzy, but he needs therapy.
Yeah, he does.
And that's the most important thing right now. And some sex.
I can provide both. I can. Look, I've gone to therapy for like 8 years. I have a psychiatrist as well. I also have the other body parts. Like, I'm just saying.
You can ask the right questions and give him what he needs physically.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on past Daddy Azzy. Rhys and Nesta arrive. And let's talk about how much of an ass Rhys is to Nesta.
Yeah.
Nesta, on the trip from House of Wind to the townhouse, complains about Rhys going slow. So what does Rhys do? He goes fast. Let's think about why Nesta would want to go fast. Azriel and Elaine show up at the townhouse first. Nesta was probably worried about Elaine, like she always is, and wanted to make sure that she was there at the same time as her sister. Instead, Rhys took the request personally and took out his irritation on Nesta.
So annoying.
So shitty.
And the fact that they showed up after Azriel and Elaine, after going fast, like, that just shows how slow he really was going.
Yeah, in my mind, he also, like, did loop-de-loops and took a detour.
Yeah,
kind
We're going fast. I agree. And it's like, no wonder people get upset that in Silver Flames, they think that Rhys completely changed personalities.
Yeah.
Right here, people.
Yeah, he's an asshole to Nesta.
Yeah, he's horrible to her.
Yeah. Now, granted, Rhys apologizes to Nesta. But though he apologizes, it comes across as a mocking apology to me, said half-heartedly and not with sincerity. Remember, Feyre is the narrator here. Not even Feyre gives us clues in her narration of that moment, whether Rhys is sincere, which is something she would call out. Instead, she just says, Rhys called up after Nesta.
Yeah.
Not with, like, sincerity or with, something clouding his eyes or anything. She provides no assessment.
You know what is also funny? A good point.
Yeah, let me finish the sentence.
Okay.
I think the omission is deliberate because Feyre's not willing to process the fact that Rhys might not be sincere.
It's a good point. I want to add on to it. The one time Feyre and Rhys have gotten into an argument in this book has been when the one time Feyre has defended Nesta.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if she has this residual, I don't want to defend her again or chastise him again because that was the one time that we got into an argument.
Right, and they agreed to be united in front of everybody else.
Yeah, but I don't think Feyre ever goes back and says, hey, Rhys, what the fuck?
Right, because what the fuck?
Yeah, I would have been pissed off.
Yeah. I also pity Cassian here. Quote, Cassian sighed at the ceiling. She'll never fly again. In my mind, Cassian had a charming plan to take Nesta flying to get her to fall for him. Oh. And he probably now worries the plan is spoiled and his chances in general with Nesta have plummeted.
Oh my God, yes. And then I'm going to add to that narrative too. Frost and Starlight spoilers. When Cassian throws the necklace or whatever he got her, I don't know. I think in my mind it's a necklace. But when he throws the present that he got her into the river, it's like, what if he also imagined, like, that's the same night he wanted to fly with her and all of that, and it was all planned out. Oh, no.
I know. It's sad.
Fucking Rhys. Nesta gets pissed off, and her eyes go all fiery. Nesta normally keeps her cool. I want to point that out. She has gone head-to-head with Feyre, and she has kept her cool. Like, many times, right? There's been tons of times she's been pissy. So the fact that Rhys pisses her off this much shows that what he did was shitty. I also love how effortlessly Cassian takes her out of her spiral just by telling a story. Super casual, like it's no big deal. It's so sweet.
This is the same moment when Feyre realizes what Nesta's power is, and that is death. Quote, I think the power is death, death made flesh, or whatever power the cauldron holds over such things. That's why the carver heard about her. In realizing this, Feyre becomes more aware of her pitfalls as a sister. Quote, it had been mere seconds for us while Nesta had gone under. I had never asked either of my sisters how long it had been for them inside the cauldron.
And she still won't ask. Sorry.
Yeah, it's true.
Wow, I never asked them about the super traumatic thing. Well, that's not going to happen. Still not going to.
I think that this group of chapters has been a really important turning point for Feyre and how she both views and interacts with her sisters, even though she doesn't go back and ask the question. I think she's going to view her sisters at least differently and choose to interact differently. I think part of it is because of Feyre's change in focus from last week, her proactive defense of those who she loves rather than the reactive revenge. However, it has also taken Feyre this day to connect with her sister's separate pain and trauma to realize they need more from her than a safe place to live. Maybe this is why Feyre suddenly becomes focused on the fact that she thinks Daddy Azzy is better for Elaine than Lucien.
Do you really think that Daddy Azzy is better for Elaine, or is it more of the trope that we're a fan of?
I think it's the trope we're a fan of, and I think Feyre hyper-focuses on Azriel and Elaine because it fits the three sisters, three friends.
Yeah.
And I think also because she's not willing to be empathetic to Lucien yet.
Lucien represents the Spring Court and Tamlin and everything that was there for her.
Right, and so in Feyre's mind, Lucien's not allowed to have a happy ending.
Agreed.
And her sister deserves something different.
By punishing Lucien, she's still punishing Elaine.
Right. We learn from Rhys a little bit about the lore around mates. Whether it's fate, the mother, or the cauldron, or just some biological process run off of pheromones that determines mates, we learn that while in the Night Court, Elaine can reject her bond with Lucien and be protected. This is in contrast to other parts of Prythian and the continent, where males believe they are entitled to the female or are, in fact, allowed to kill any male the female chooses for herself. This feels like different practices throughout our own world, and it really gives me the ick.
It's a huge ick, because it is an ick. It's not great. I don't approve.
No.
I don't approve it. You heard it here first, folks. Book Talk does not approve. It's also setting up the concept that Elaine gets to choose. Whenever it's her story, I guarantee that SJM's going to make it about choice.
Yeah, I agree.
Whoever she chooses, however it goes out, that's going to be her theme.
I agree. When Rhys points out that Azriel has been preoccupied with Mor for centuries, and Feyre questions why a bond hasn't snapped into place for them, quote, Rhys's eyes shuddered. I think that is a question Azriel has been asking himself every day since he met Mor. Am I allowed to request that you not play matchmaker? Let them sort it out.
That was the saddest, most pathetic thing about Azriel that's ever been said. I'm sorry for calling you pathetic, Azriel. Why am I apologizing to a fictional character? But he's been waiting for a mating bond to click into place for like 500 years.
It's crazy.
She's not your mate, bro.
Yeah. And to continue that, I want to point out that not once does Rhys say, I think they belong together.
Yep.
Or I wonder why too.
Yeah.
In fact, Rhys's eyes shudder, and I feel like this usually happens when he's hiding something. What do I think he's hiding? I think he knows the truth about Mor's sexuality.
Yeah, that's true. Let's also discuss that Azriel has been hyper-fixated on a woman who is not interested in him. Again, for over 500 years. And let's not be fools here. Azriel knows that Mor is bi. I have no doubt about that. If he's able to spy on Amren, he spies on Mor.
Mm-hmm.
That means he knows that she's not interested in him, but he keeps longing for her. So the first woman who shows him kindness and is very unavailable, he's going to be super interested in her. That's Elaine. She showed him kindness, and it's like another person who's just so unattainable and doesn't make sense for him.
Right. Because, that's his pattern. Because he has trauma, just like we all do.
Yeah. It's true. We all do. We all have trauma. I mean, they don't have like a therapy system like we have here, but it's like we all have trauma, but that's why it's like also our job to like get our help.
Right. Get the help you need.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is an extension of mommy issues for him.
Ooh, yeah.
Right? Because he's the bastard child.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, look, guys, I lust after him here, but Jac from my 20s would have definitely gone after him. Jac in my 30s is like, if I had a very real Daddy Azzy here, the icks I would get from him.
Right. Like, you're hot, but I don't need to interact with you at all.
It's really true. Yeah. It's like, I'm not here to sign up for those issues.
Yeah, exactly. I've got enough of my own. I don't need yours too.
It's true. There's a trend on TikTok, and it's like, is he hot or is he just like a white man on a stage with a guitar?
Oh, okay.
Or another example is he hot or is he just the only guy my age at the airport?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And that's the same thing here. Like for Azriel, is Elaine hot or is she just super unavailable?
Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
Another one is he hot or is he just my friend's older brother or my older brother's friend?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Is he hot or is he just my angry teacher?
Oh, that would hit hard.
Speaking from experience. Answer, he's not hot. As Feyre and Rhysand talk, Feyre begins, quote, braiding my hair into a coronet atop my head. Periodically, Rhys hands Feyre hairpins. Quote, we worked in unison, pinning my hair into place, with Rhys pinning a hard-to-reach section. A coronet, like a crown, conveys to us Feyre donning her queen or goddess persona. Think spring court. What I love about this scene is Rhys supporting her. He's helping her become her highest self by working with her to finish her hair. Or, if you want to look at it a different way, he's helping her become her worst self. You know, whatever floats your boat.
I love that. I love this part in this interaction because it can be interpreted so many different ways. I read this as Feyre having a crisis and trying to grapple with the fact that she crossed a line by invading Lucian's mind, and Rhys is comforting her, and he's literally pitting her back together.
I love that too. I love that perspective because of what I'm about to say next.
Okay, cool.
So I'm going to be honest, this whole scene makes me laugh a lot because when Rhys tries to make Feyre feel better about invading Lucian's mind, he tells her, quote, say it's the last time and be done with it. If you want to make yourself feel better, Lucian did technically violate the rules we set. He crossed the line first. And those are gray morals. That's not like logically correct moral reasoning. And Feyre's totally into it. So into it that they're both wearing matching crowns and they've got the persona of Lord and Lady Knight and they get hot and bothered. And so this idea of Feyre trying to put herself back together and Rhys helping put her into place, he's putting her into place with bad morals.
I see what you're saying, but are they bad? It's this whole technicality thing. You and I live for the technicality. You and I are gray morals.
No, it's true. I don't deny that.
Technically, he's not wrong.
But it's still shitty. Like, if you're going to be, like, pure white good morals, this is wrong.
I guess this really just proves how gray I am. Because I'm like, I don't see it.
No, it's wrong.
Okay, thank you. But are we sure?
Yes.
Okay.
We are Slytherins at heart, Jack.
This
is the Slytherin showing.
Yeah. Because you and I literally did this week.
Oh, yeah.
Where I was like, you had a concern about something I was going to post.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, technically X, Y, and Z.
I know.
This is just called us hyping each other up.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're morally gray villains. No, we're just morally gray.
Morally gray protagonists.
Yeah.
And now breadcrumbs. Before we jump into breadcrumbs, we do have to say there are a lot of multiverse, SJM, everything spoilers. So if you don't want to listen to them, skip them or just stop listening. In chapter 22, when Rhys tells Feyre she will not be able to reach him when she's in the prison, it's because of, quote, wards and spells far older than Prythian. A hint, perhaps, for the multiverse and the Dusk Court.
Cassian tells Feyre about old gods that ruled the forests and the rivers and the mountains. Then magic shifted to the High Fae, who brought the cauldron and Mother along with them. Just the multiverse nuggets.
So many.
Yeah, we're going to have to bring back Happy Hermit.
Yeah, at some point. Still in chapter 22, Legends of the Bonecarver whispered of his, quote, being able to fell hundreds of soldiers with one breath. And we get to see that later at the end of the book.
When Feyre sees the Bonecarver and realizes it's Nyx, quote, the High Lord's son, my son, our son, should we survive long enough to bear him? It's ironic, and I know SGM knew in this moment that Nyx's conception would also be the threat to Feyre and Rhys's life. Because Rhys signed that death pact with her.
Yeah, it's so stupid.
It's stupid, but also with how much he's risking himself.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It makes sense. Don't approve, but it makes sense.
When the Bonecarver is talking to Cassian about Nesta, he says, quote, what did you wake that day in Hybern, Prince of Bastards? Technically, Cassian didn't wake anything because it was Nesta, so this is giving me some major multiverse vibes.
In chapter 23, the Carver says of his original home, quote, where we came from, I do not believe it is now anything more than dust drifting across the plain. There is no home to return to. not one that I desire. Is it possible that the Asteri have obliterated the world where the bone carver and his siblings originated from?
I think so.
Yeah.
That's my theory.
Maybe Amren was the one who destroyed it.
Maybe.
Let me just throw shit out there. See
Why
what
not?
happens. If we throw out enough theories here, then we get to claim we were right.
At some point.
At some point.
Still in chapter 23, the carver mentions in his tellings of his history that, quote, I might have bided my time, waited for his siblings' power to fade, for that long ago Fey warrior to trick Striga into diminishing her power. Clever, that Fey warrior. Her bloodline is long gone now, though a trace still runs through some human line. My theory is that the carver is speaking of Queen Thea and that her blood runs in Feyre's family through Mother Archeron.
Yeah. In chapter 24, when Lucian snarls at Asriel escorting Elaine, Rhys says, relax, Asriel isn't the ravishing type. Ugh, the Silver Flame secret chapter suggests otherwise. Like, if you haven't read the secret chapter,
You need to. Just the first part. I mean, all of it's
all
good.
of it, and then like read it over and over and over.
Dear listener, this is Amy. I could try to fool you into thinking that Jac and I recorded this at the same time that we recorded episode 8, but that's not true. This is Sunday, the Sunday before episode 8 airs, because I was editing it and realized we missed a breadcrumb.
Oh, and boy, oh boy, it's a breadcrumb.
It is a breadcrumb. So in chapter 24, when Feyre goes to the library in the House of Wind to see Nesta and Elaine, Feyre describes Elaine as, quote, even wasted away by grief and despair, Elaine's beauty was remarkable. Hers was a face that could bring kings to their knees. Do you know who she brings to his knees? The King of Highborn.
Yep. Like literally.
Literally, she stabs him and brings him to his knees.
Yeah.
It's fucking amazing.
Holy shit. It's such a good one. She's so sneaky.
She's so sneaky. And it was worth recording and tacking this on at the end.
100%. I wonder if it's going to sound smooth. I believe in us.
The power of editing.
The power of editing.
Going back to the question we asked ourselves at the start of the episode, what are the consequences of choices made in this section?
Ooh. Great question. This is an episode, and the chapters included, is where a lot of things and balls start rolling and a lot of movement starts happening. For me, the biggest choices that are made involve Feyre and her sisters and how she's handling them, while also still not looking for a resolution with them.
I think you make a really great point, and that is, up until now, it's all been set up. This is where we see decisions being made that really move the plot along with the Ouroboros, with Feyre and her sisters. Without those things, a lot of the plot would still struggle to gain momentum.
Yeah.
And I think, though not a lot seems to happen in these chapters, as you can see, there is a lot.
Yep.
We found a lot that we think is significant to the rest of the story. And for me, this does feel very much like a turning point in the novel.
It took us 8 episodes to get to the turning point.
That's crazy. We're almost halfway through the season.
I know. Feyre and her actions and her choices with her sisters. That's the one that like kind of blows my mind, I think, is that Feyre makes so many decisions in this section. Like, she's like, okay, you guys are moving in with me. We're going to get the Ouroboros. Like, Elaine and Asriel, they should be together. Like, she makes a lot of choices. I'm going to invade Lucian's mind. Like, there's so many choices that are definitely being made. And we're about to see the consequences for everything.
Right. And you know what's interesting to me is the fact that the choices being made here still are being made with pride being the underlying motivator.
Yep.
Which is what was happening in the Spring Court as well.
Yeah.
And that's usually a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. It's made off of pride and without consulting others.
Right.
She didn't ask anyone. I mean, should her sisters stay with her? Yeah, they should have been there with her from the second she arrived. No doubt. But there hasn't been any consulting with anyone.
Do you want to come to the townhouse? Here are the reasons why I think it might be better, but I'll leave the choice up to you.
Yeah. Like, I think for Nesta, would be like, hey, look, I'm going to bring Elaine. She can't consent to it. Her mind's all over the place, but I'm going to do this. She needs to be healthy and good. Would you like to come?
Right.
Of course, Nesta's going to come with her, but she didn't do that. She's like, all you bitches are coming with me. And Lucian, number one bitch.
Right. It's It's just fascinating because Feyre hasn't grown a lot since the beginning of the book.
Yes.
And I think we should be uneasy with what's happening.
Yeah. Bringing back, I also joke about Lucian being number one bitch. I like him now. Season 1 and 2 me, Mike, not so much. But she doesn't need to ask Rhys for his consent necessarily on this. Mm-hmm. Feyre bringing Lucian back was surprising to me.
Yeah.
I would have gotten his own apartment next door or something.
Why not?
Yeah. He didn't need to be in the townhouse with them.
Again, why not ask Lucian? What does he want?
Yeah. Hey, would you prefer to come to the townhouse? Would you like your own apartment? We can set something up. Or would you like to stay here?
Not that hard.
Not that hard.
She's not a consulting type.
No, she is not. Which, again, makes sense for who she is because she didn't need to consult anyone to keep her and her sisters alive.
Right.
Messed up. And now this week's feature review from Apple Podcasts.
This review is from Zeal to Heal in Canada, titled Outstanding.
Oh.
Fun to listen to and an insightful analysis. The hosts are lovely, immaculate vibes. Looking forward to following along the whole way.
Oh my God, I've never been called an immaculate vibe before.
I know. I just love that. Immaculate vibes. I want to be immaculate vibes all the time.
I know. It takes us heavily editing for us to be immaculate vibes.
It's a good thing you don't have to see our faces while you listen to this.
The poor people who watch our lives.
Oh, man. But thank you so much, Zeal to Heal.
Thank you.
I'm glad people have fun listening to us.
Yeah, because you and I have fun.
I can't guarantee anyone else is going to have
That's
fun.
the thing. Like, you and I have a blast. We're a hoot and a half to ourselves. The fact that other people find that to be entertaining too. Thank you.
Thank you. We love that.
If you'd like your review read on the podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star written review.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we will be exploring chapters 25 through 27 of A Court of Wings and Ruin.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a weekly mini episode.
If you are enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo. You can also follow us on TikTok and Instagram at the handle booktalkforbooktalk. Bye!
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes per detail.